In this video, we'll explore the paradox of perfection and evil. So, evil, of course, is easy to understand. We think of child molestation, torture, human rights violations, corruptions, etc. So we have a long list of evil, which people would define in different ways. But what about perfection? How do we incorporate perfection? And first of all, within paradox lies depth perception. So when you look at the human body, we have two ears and we have two eyes and two nostrils. And if we take the reality that this eye sees, and then take the reality that this eye sees, they see a slightly different reality. This eye sees a little bit further around the corner that you can't see, that I'm looking at, than this eye, because it's coming a little bit to my right. This eye sees a little bit more around the corner of the object over here, which again, you can't see, but you can imagine looking at a sphere. If you really wanted to see the whole sphere, you couldn't see it from a position like this, but you'd keep going out. And if the sphere was in the middle, you'd eventually be able to see the entirety of the sphere if the two perspectives looking were far enough apart. And so what one eye can see flat, two or more eyes can see with the perception of depth. And the resolution of the paradox is not either or, it's both and. This eye sees accurately, this eye sees accurately, and together you get this third dimension called depth. And it is, in fact, the brain doing rapid calculations of what these two eyes and ears are hearing and seeing that allows us to see how far an object is or is not in front of us. And so when you take this on a physical level, you get depth. The same is true mentally. If you take opposites, the world is perfect, the world is evil. Those are two opposites. Now, in order to see those opposites, the eyes have to be very far apart. Those are not close eyes, meaning if you're looking at 6 inches apart, you don't get this diversity. You could kind of also think of it as the human senses. If half of my body was halfway around the earth, then I could say it's night, and I could say it's day simultaneously, because half of my body would be in the part of the earth that was day, half of my body is in the present part of the world where it's night. And what you would see in joining those two paradoxical statements is a moving, fluid, spinning dynamic in which at any given point half of the world was in darkness and half of it was in light. Half of it was hot and half of it was cold, and all of these paradoxical statements are true. It's freezing and it's boiling to death. Well, yeah, it's freezing in the North Pole, it's boiling to death in the desert. So it's all true. It leads to depth perception. So most of us suffer to one degree or another on a daily basis. And particularly in the Western world, a lot of that suffering is originated psychologically, meaning nobody's beat me or thrown rocks at me anytime recently. I'm not starved to death, no. But what I have is a variety of thoughts and feelings that create stress, that create pain. People are supposed to be nice. Being nice looks like this, this, and this. People are not doing this, this, and this. They're not being nice. They should be nice, but they're not nice. So I'm in pain about that. and the government is supposed to have integrity, and integrity looks like this, 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 and this. But the government is doing this, 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 and this. There's a gap. They should be doing this, but they're doing this. And there's stress because I want them to do this, but they're doing this. So I'm stressed about that. My body should look like this, 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 and this. My body doesn't look like this, 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 and this. Instead, it looks like this, 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 and this. There's a gap. There's a stress. It should be looking like this. It looks like this. I don't like this. I want this. So I'm in pain. There's a separation from and a longing for. And so a tremendous amount of the suffering and pain and what we might call evil. A grown man is not supposed to sexually violate a child. You are a grown man. You sexually violated a child. You should be this way, but you're this way. That's evil. You're an evil person. You think of Jeffrey Epstein and, all of the underage girls that he did this to and did that to and and so he was supposed to be like this, but he was like this, and that's bad, and that's painful. And childhood is supposed to look like this, but instead for these girls it looked like this. That's bad. That's painful, and so there's stress and suffering like this. And so a tremendous amount of the pain and evil comes from a frame, a paradigm, a picture that is held up as this is the way it should be. And then there's a gap between that picture and what is. I should be always honest, but I'm telling lies. Well, there's pain there. Anytime there's a gap between what is desired or shoulded, meaning that should be that way, but it's this way, or I desire it to be this way, but it's this way, you have pain. You have frustration. You have a gap. So in this sense, almost everything is imperfect. Everything is flawed. The garden is supposed to look like this, but it looks like that, so the garden is flawed. My house is supposed to look like this, but it's like that. My heater is supposed to heat it evenly like this, but it doesn't. It heats it unevenly. And my front door is supposed to do this, but it does this. My computer is supposed to do this, but it does this. And so all you need to have an endless amount of imperfection and suffering are clear definitions of how things should be that are not how they are. And suddenly, the entire world is fucked up, coming to an end. Horror of horrors, a travesty, this, that, and the other. And the question is, how do we get to that sense where everything's perfect? Now, the human brain and human mind is not predisposed to perfection. It's predisposed to recognize pain and fear above all other things. All you have to do is spend a time in a paradisical landscape and notice one little wriggling inch in that landscape, and your body becomes rigid because it could be a snake. So even though 99.9% of the landscape is magnificent, the temperature is just right, you're in the warm water, you see a little wriggling shape, and suddenly you're paralyzed with fear. This little point in this vast landscape might be a threat. And bingo, all eyes and attention is on that thing. The brain is predisposed to fear, and to fear pain, and to notice and exaggerate pain. So where do we get this sense of perfection? Well, in transcendent meditation, in DMT flashes, in certain psychedelic journeys that are non-verbal in nature. In dreams, we have this sense where it all makes sense. We have this sense that it's perfect. We realize in these moments of grace that exactly what needs to happen is happening. And it's all perfect. Then we come back into our set and say, wait a minute. What's supposed to be happening is this. And what's actually happening is this. It's not perfect at all. We come back into language, back into paradigm, back into frame, back into cult thinking. And suddenly, everything is wrong because there's a gap between what we want, what we should, and what is. But if we look closely at a lot of these things, you can see that there is an inevitable and endless bell curve of evolution. Evolution towards distinction, towards complexity, towards grace, towards beauty, truth, goodness, towards symmetry, towards balance, towards success, and towards fun. So you take many of the most common human experiences 200 years ago and look at those experiences today, and there's more grace. People are living a little bit longer. There's more medical breakthroughs. There's a wider variety of food all around the planet. People are making more money. Spousal abuse is down. Number of people killed in wars is down. Number of plagues is down. Per capita, now because we've tripled the number of people on the planet in just a few hundred years, there is more of all of that because there's more people doing it. But per person, there's less of it. And so you can see there's an evolutionary path towards more and more sophisticated ways of doing things, more and more variety. Human beings have created literally millions upon millions of new energy patterns on the planet. You've got an explosion of technology and possibility. The possibility field of this planet is higher than it was 100 years ago, for better and for worse. You look at things like sociopathic behavior. We can find it all over the place. Well, sociopathic behavior comes from sociopathic environments. Sociopathic environments breed reptiles, stimulate the reptilian brain, because that's the brain that survives in a sociopathic environment. So you could say that sociopaths are not the problem. Or you could say that sociopaths breed sociopaths who breed sociopaths. And until the state of consciousness is such that we create an empathic environment, we will continue to breed sociopaths to survive in a sociopathic environment. Until we don't anymore, until we graduate with the intelligence level to create an empathic environment, and then suddenly we breed empathic people. You can also see that we look at ourselves as isolated individuals. But the science is teaching us that if we don't think holistically, if we let it be okay that people are starving to death, being tortured and tormented over here, triggering sociopathic brain development in those individuals, which triggers sociopathic behavior, which then ripples outward as a social virus. You can see that those sociopathic human beings who go untended in a reptilian environment are teaching us to what? To go outside our shell and think as a species. And that when we think as a species rather than as isolated individuals, the possibility field of the species goes up exponentially. And in an exponentially bigger possibility field, you have exponentially more chance for conscious fun, for conscious success, for grace, for intelligence, for excellence. So we see a slow, natural progression towards complexity, towards grace, towards balance, towards symmetry, towards intelligence, and towards consciousness. Now, once consciousness joins the ecology, the consciousness can diverge from the underlying natural pattern in a state of antithesis, or can flow with the natural pattern in a state of grace and a state of growth. And in flowing with the pattern in a state of growth can accelerate that growth. And in antithesis can retard that growth. So you could say that consciousness is problematic in an unconscious, unskilled people trying to utilize it. But that unskilled, unconscious behavior creates pain. And pain creates consciousness. And consciousness leads to a refinement of skill, which creates less pain. And so there's no way to lose in this journey. The only question is whether or not we want to co-create with life to speed up the evolutionary process. Now, we can say that a crocodile is evil or a snake is bad, but the reptilian brain is at the base of the brainstem. In the evolutionary process towards complexity, towards grace, towards consciousness, we have to evolve through the reptilian period, and we have to survive it. We have to succeed at being effective reptiles in a reptilian environment, or we don't get to the next stage of limbic brain development, of rational brain development, of empathic brain development. And if we don't get there, we don't get to the ultimate liberation, which is transcendence. We don't get to access those portions of the brain that take us forward. So whether we participate and slow things down or speed things up is part of learning about consciousness. And once we learn about consciousness and freely choose to speed things up, the exponential growth of evolution towards grace, towards intelligence, towards transcendence is so much faster than evolution could go without consciousness that it's worth all the bumbling around. It's kind of like taking off training wheels. If you take off training wheels, you fall down initially. But once you get the hang of it, you go so much faster without training wheels. You can do so many tricks without training wheels that ultimately you are happy you took off the training wheels. You're not happy the first time you scrape your knee. You're not happy the second time. You maybe want to put them back on again. But ultimately, the development and the skill that is possible in BMXing without training wheels is exponentially higher, is worth the cost. You bring in consciousness, and some people seek to destroy themselves and others and do this and that. And others try to help, and others do this, and it's all over the place. But ultimately, with mastery comes alignment with the flow of life. Why? Because it's more fun. And why do we pick what's more successful and more fun and more beautiful and more true? Because it's our nature. Because it feels good. And every human being in the history of humanity has an inner compass. And that compass is pointing them towards feeling sustainably better and avoiding feeling chronically worse. feeling sustainably better and avoiding feeling chronically worse. And in order to align with that, our feelings say this feels good, but then it crashes. This feels good, but it's sustainable. As we learn, every human being is consciously and unconsciously pointing towards sustainably feeling better. The question is, how do we get there? What's our map? What's our paradigm? And some paradigms are very efficient. Other paradigms are incredibly inefficient. But life is a winning game. Life has been creating a variety upon variety upon variety in an endless iteration process in which more and more complex synergies. Life is a game of synergy. Life is a game of complexity. Life is a game of winning. Life is a game of life. Life throws out 1 billion dice, and some of them win. It's not playing with one die. It's playing with variety upon variety upon variety. And life doesn't care which life form ascends and which one becomes compost for what ascends. It's all life. It's only the human ego that says, well, this is my part of life. I want this part to win. Even if it's stupid, even if it's unintelligent, even if it's corrupt, even if it's small, I want this part to win because it's me. Life is not egotistical. Life says, I want life to win. And if you can figure out how to win, wonderful. And if you can't, wonderful. Some other part of life will win. And it's all life. And once the ego dissolves and we transcend, physicists are very clear that no energy is created or destroyed. The energy that was me, that failed, was less elegant than a part of life that succeeded. Now, not from the ego's perspective, because from the ego's perspective, the most important thing is me. But from life's perspective, it's what is the most complex? What is the most synergistic? What is the most sustainable? And if that's you, great. If it's not, great. You will become food for something that is, and it's you. It's a larger you. You're part of an ecology. You're not a tiny little bit separated from everything else. So it's wonderful to fail. And it's wonderful to succeed. Life's winning either way. In life's game, something always replaces. If one planet, amongst all the billions of planets out there, goes up in smoke in a nuclear fragment, life doesn't have a this is how it should be, this is how it shouldn't. It just means another planet seeds out into the star system more rapidly that had a more sustainable and effective pattern of life. And this one didn't. That's a good thing if you're life. It's a horrible thing. It's an evil, it's an atrocity if you're this planet and this is the only thing that exists for you. It's horrible. But if you look at it objectively, if you failed as a political figure, you failed to engage with the people as much as this other person, as a plant, you died out, got sick, got constant disease, and now this other really healthy plant took over. As a planet, as an animal, as a human being. Life is in the game of success, of abundance, etc. Our decision is how we use our freedom and consciousness to either be a part of that or not a part of it. And so within the box, everything is wrong. Everything is imperfect. Everything is flawed. And in that flaw is bad, is evil, is horrible, is painful, is fearful. Because there is not a single thing that if you really get into it that you would say is perfect. You might even say, that's too perfect. Let's mess it up a little bit and do this so it's not perfect even if it's perfect. It's not the perfect song, the bass on that. Could they get bigger speakers and this and that? It's the nature of the human brain to create this tension between what I want and what is, what should be and what is, what's good and what's bad. And so in that language and framing, we have an endlessly imperfect world. And stepping out of that paradigm, stepping out of the language, stepping out of the egoic, separate sense of self, everything is absolutely perfect. And when we make a mistake, it creates pain. The pain creates consciousness. The consciousness leads to motivation and mastery. The motivation and mastery leads to change, and the change reduces the pain. If we make a mistake again and the pain gets worse, then we reverse course until we find that place of grace in which we can be all that we can be, in which we've mastered the art of changing our culturated paradigms into alignment with this great vitality and flow of life.